Well, something that I tell people too is what he's talking about there is that if you just caulk up your bathroom, say you have a spare bathroom, say it's even just a little sink and toilet, uh, that you can caulk up your bathroom. Once you raise you some shiitakes or some oysters outside, you can caulk up your bathroom, and people get all excited when they start getting mushrooms. If you caulk up your bathroom, and you can make a sterile chamber in there, and you can raise medicinals or whatever you want to raise in there. And medicinal mushrooms, you can make so much more money off medicinal mushrooms than you can magic mushrooms. That it's really, if you're good at it and like it, it's really worth caulking up your bathroom. You can make $250,000 a year off a caulked up bathroom and not ever having to go outside. Stay home, eat your medicinal mushrooms. But but this is like basically about raising mushrooms. And so you want to raise mushrooms. I can guarantee you a constant friend that's going to come along with you named contamination. And raising mushrooms, we were talking about old growth forest is completely sterile. And you get like around the moss, you see a little mossy hill or something, that moss produces like what was concentrated down into bactine. It produces a very strong chemical that makes this nice little sterile area. So, that's why all these mushrooms are growing in the forest, is because it's sterile. And we go there with our, dropping our breadcrumbs and our piss and poop and combing our hair, and it's not sterile anymore. And so you can maintain these old growth forests and still have all the mushrooms you want. And you can raise them yourself, have a constant supply. We support raising mushrooms more than wild foraging, because you can have a constant supply of what you want, as opposed to be dependent on the weather, dependent on environmental conditions, because they only come when their environmental conditions are perfect. And something like chanterelles will come often in a bunch of leaves under trees, but some of them, they won't come but like every 4 or 5 years, like that. We have a lot of syllabes, and we have 3 syllabes in this area, and they come when it rains in the fall, when it rains a lot and gets warm. And if we don't have those conditions, we don't have those conditions. But sometimes in this area we'll have those conditions 3 and 4 and 5 times in the fall, and get massive amounts of them growing here, but naturally. But contamination is going to be your constant friend if you try to raise them and create your own environments. And what you try to do is you try to create sterility. And you can do it. It's possible. John Holliday, he doesn't have any problems with contamination, but he has spent a fortune and moved to the top of the Rocky Mountains to do it too. Get away from funguses in the air. And that he says, from raising the world's top mushroom raiser, says that there's no way that you can raise mushrooms at sea level with any kind of air filter, because there's just too much fungus in the air, and it'll go, too many of them are too small. So your contamination, you got to have to, what we tell people is just to accept it. Don't try to fight and hate contamination. Accept it. But realize that the more steps you take to encourage more sterility, the less contamination you're going to have. The more of a crop, the more, quality of your crop. So, and the more money you're going to spend to deal with contamination. We have a friend that raised mushrooms for years and just got more and more sterile, and he just got over it. And now Oliver, I know Oliver, but now he takes a bale of straw, throws it in his pond, puts it on those things that they stack stuff on, a pallet, throws it on a pallet, takes some oyster spawn. He's a big old strong dude, and he takes that spawn and just sticks it all down in the bale and just leaves it under a tree. He doesn't get, and he gets, for the amount of trouble he goes to and the amount of money he spends, it's the most productive way that he has found, because, it's a whole bale of straw. And what you do with the straw is you grind it up, you take a bale of straw, it's all packed up, you unpack it, you try to grind it up a little bit, and then you repack it, and why go through all that? It's already packed up. Just stick your spawn in it and go for it and stuff. And so, but, and he just accepts contamination at a really high level. And so, but then if you want to gawk up your bathroom, or you want to do something like that, or raise mushrooms in jars, or raise them in bags, whatever, you're going to have to accept contamination. We suggest a 3-step program where, like, you have 3 areas. You go into one area and you take off your clothes. Maybe you wash yourself, clean yourself up. Go into the next area and have another level of decontamination there, where maybe your air, maybe, you know, like, if you really want to have sterile, like John Holiday, you got to take a bath and put on his whole suit, a hazmat suit, to go into his, you have to take a bath to put on the hazmat suit, you know, and things. And so, you know, you can get as crazy as you want to, but you can also make as much money as you want to. I'm sure y'all all know John Holiday sold Aloha for millions and millions of dollars and is taking the money and is building mushroom factories in third world countries at his own expense. He has 3 in Bangladesh. He has several in countries you can't even pronounce in Africa. And he's teaching the people there how to raise mushrooms, but his main thing is sterility.
Who's doing that?
John Holiday. And he owned Aloha Medicinals, which is, John Holiday is who started all this backyard mushroom raising stuff, who started this whole mushroom revolution. It's him. He's who started the whole interest in medicinal mushrooms. He raises all of the mushrooms for the drug companies, which a lot of them are heart drugs, a lot of really powerful drugs. He raises the mushrooms, and only he raises those mushrooms. And Aloha Medicinals is cool. If you want to contact him and raise mushrooms for $250,000, he'll set you up and guarantee you $2 million at the end of 1 year. Wow. And I mean, he's got it down. He's going in these countries and doing it. But the deal is sterility, and that he can maintain sterility. Yeah?
Wasn't he the first one to grow claviceps in the United States?
He's the first one to grow anything, pretty much. He's the first one. Cordyceps?
Cordyceps, yeah.
Yeah, he's who brought cordyceps to the world. He went to Tibet and discovered the cordyceps. He heard about them and was interested in going around the world finding these mushrooms. And he went to the Himalayas and went on, you know, what we call it, yak trip up into the Himalayas with the people and got them and came back and wrote about them. And his original article that he wrote about them, that brought them to the world, is on my website, on our festival, under the festival. If you click on my website and go to festival, and then you click on John Holiday, and his article's on there that he wrote, and it's really fascinating. Yeah.
What's special about those mushrooms?
Oh, they grow out of insect heads, out of insect brains, and they rearrange the insect. Like an ant who gets cordyceps will start doing things like climbing up in trees and doing like really weird things, and it takes over their brain absolutely and totally changes their behavior pattern to something that promotes the growth of cordyceps. What happens if you eat them is they rearrange your brain and cause you to start doing things you might not do, and causes your body to start doing things that it would not have done, particularly cure a number of diseases that your body has your body produces T cells, and that's it. You eat some cordyceps and you're going to produce RSTUVW. You're going to produce a lot more types of immune cells than your body produced before. And they're considered to be the most medicinal thing that's ever been found. They sell for $1,000 each. And so he was going on, here's another story, I'll get back to this, but he's all sterile, John Holiday's all steriled out with everything and whatnot. And so he's trying to raise these cordyceps, and he can't find a growth matrix to raise them on because they have to be raised at this altitude and on this particular type of caterpillar that he's raising these caterpillars, and his caterpillars all flying all over his house and whatnot and stuff. And so John Holiday's wanting to live with them, to understand them and become one with the caterpillars, so that he can, the moths, so he can understand the caterpillars, why they're in the ground and what they're doing. And he started out with a few medicinal mushrooms, ate too many, and was an engineer, a nuclear scientist working on nuclear subs, and just decided that raising mushrooms would be more fun because he ate too many mushrooms. And so, but anyway, he's trying to be all sterile, raising his cordyceps and get some cordyceps started and all scientific, Dr. Holiday and whatnot. And so they start growing in his cat food. He has cordyceps growing in his cat food. And so the matrix that John Holiday raises, all the cordyceps sinensis that are raised in the world, pretty much he raises them, is on cat food. And so, dry cat food. And he also uses a couple of kinds of dog foods that he thinks are really good for the cordyceps. And but all the cordyceps you buy, of course, are cordyceps militaria, which don't have the sinensis characteristics and qualities, yet people promote they do. So, you know, don't believe in the sinensis. I mean, believe in the sinensis, the military, they're different. But it's back to this thing of sterility and the fact that you're going to, at some point, If you're not John Holiday and maintain his level of sterility, you're going to have this little contamination friend. And like him, it's best just to understand it, become one with it, and how to deal with it and manage it. And, you know, and so that's what's happened. Like he said, we've done the festival for 9 years, and I've done workshops about raising mushrooms for years and years. And people, they come to the festival, they take them we give you 3 different things. Give you shiitakes, oysters, and wine caps to take home, and that you like make little things, take home and raise yourself. And so if you're not a real idiot, one of the 3 will work. And so then they call us up, oh, we got mushrooms, and they're mushroom raisers now. They're in heaven. You can't convince them that they don't have a mushroom farm under their tree. And they take their first mushrooms to a potluck, and they're a mushroom raiser at the potluck. Yeah, we raise those. Yeah, they're fantastic, aren't they? And so whatnot. And so they order them some more spawn, you know, and so now they have so now they plant them all, and now they have contamination. And so, but what does contamination mean? Contamination is like, what does disease mean? It means something's not easy anymore, or not at ease anymore. And so, you know, they call us up. And so what they call us up with, these are the first 3 and most common that they get in mushrooms. And it seems like that it doesn't matter what kind of mushrooms there are, that these kind of contaminations are what seem to kind of go with it. And the first thing that people kind of come up with, particularly on logs, is black mold. They go like, look, everybody's nodding their head. Anybody's had a shiitake log has probably experienced black mold, you know, when they first got it or when it crapped out. And so what it is, black mold. These are some of my logs right here. You can see it growing on the top log. See the little black on the top log, and then see it growing on the ends of the log. And you can go to the next one. You can go to the next one. Okay. Yeah, here's you some genuine black mold right there. And right there, see how it's even growing out. The shiitakes, they have mycelium that'll grow out and be a little bit puffy on super healthy, wonderful logs. Like those were super healthy, wonderful logs. And you can see how it's all puffy. And now you can see how it got black mold right there on it and stuff. And see down there, it's black mold starting. And so this is just sort of another shot. You can see that it went from this log to this log to this log. And so, I got a problem. You know, and you know, shiitake is worth a lot of money, $14 a pound. You get 3 times the weight of the log back. So a 25-pound log gives you 75 pounds of shiitakes at $14 a pound. That's a lot of money. So a lot in our house, that's a lot of dog food and various things. So, you know, and the symptoms basically that you'll have are, and you remember that the black mold, this is the same exact black mold that grows on sheetrock in your house, that gets in your lungs, is now a huge problem in India. All the people getting COVID in India are now getting this same black mold in their lungs, and it's like mycelium mucosis, or something like mucosis, or something like that. It's not a titus, but anyway, it's becoming a huge problem in humans in their lungs with COVID. That's becoming as big a problem as COVID in India. And of course, people in their houses get it, log cabins get it. It's a big problem with log cabins. Because log cabins get it, there's several powerful fungicides on the market today for spraying your log cabin. And it's a fungicide. It's not, some fungicides are just other funguses. Some are gypsum-based. And some are some hardcore, terrible, nasty compounds that contain metals and get in your system and the environment and are not good for us. And so when you have it, there's 3 basic types, but you know, one they all end up black. One starts out and one gets kind of yellowish on the top, and one gets blue and green. But they're listed here so you know that that there's more to black fungus than just being black. Some are yellow to pink to green, and but they end up with some black around the edges. The best thing you can do to prevent it is try to deal with sterility, try to keep things as clean as you can. We cover our logs with a tarp. We take the tarp off when it rains, you know, and we try our best to do that. And borate products are like borax. What we use for ours and to kill for termites, for ants, for whatever. We use 20 mule team borax. It used to be, a box of detergent used to be $2 and that was 50 cents.
Yeah.
Now it's really expensive, and I don't know why, because it's just borax and some sodium, you know, but still it's really expensive. But when you go buy a box of borax, it's a lot cheaper to buy that. And if you want to like spray your logs or something, it's not good to spray them with your logs. If you're going to spray your logs with borax, you don't want to use the 20 mule team product because it like bubbles, and you know, you could if you wanted to, but you know, it don't seem like it doesn't. Soap doesn't really like the sprayer, but borax does. And but something else that you can do is the borax products work with things like oysters, wine caps, whatnot. You can spray them if you start getting black mold on them. But the logs, a lot of times you can spray them, but it doesn't really do that much. But what we found is that you can soak them in bleach. Bleach, as a rule, doesn't kill all fungus. A lot of fungus now lives through bleach, and so it's not really recommended. We use, we call it peroxide. Peroxide. Fungi hate peroxide, huh?
Yeah, we use peroxide too. We'll doctor it and then spray in the spot that has the infection. But could I use borax instead? I find that when I do that, like if I get an infection the first round, if I spot it, I'll take whatever cake, because there's 2,000 cakes in this tent, and if there's one or two that I have to rip out at first, because I don't want my whole 3 weeks messed up. So sometimes it starts out with no infection, but sometimes it's like instant infection, and I'm spending the whole 3 weeks doctoring.
Do you spray the inside of your tent before you start?
We put the UV light. I have a tech coat on. I have gloves, mask.
But the inside of your tent, before you start raising it, do you do a lot of treatment on the interior and treat your shoes?
We have we have the 3-room thing, and I have separate shoes. I never even take.
As long as you have the 3-room thing, you're trying.
Yes.
You're trying.
We have the UV. We bleach down everything. We take everything out at the end of the.
Yeah, forget the bleach. Just forget the bleach.
Yeah, so
peroxide. There's 2 kinds of peroxide we'll get into later, and I'll tell you about them.
Yeah.
The kind you buy at the drugstore is like okay to brush your teeth with and rub on your body. And you can buy also agricultural. And what's in the store is about 3% to 5%. What's in the jug agricultural can run is about 35%. You can also buy ones that are even higher percentage, but as I understand, you have to order those special to get anything higher than 35% shipped.
Right.
Shipped. The problem is shipping, because over 35%, it's explosive, and you have to have a materials handling license to ship peroxide over 35%. But you can get it, but the 35% and the 31% is a product created for gardening. It's used in gardening because the gardeners are who have made the funguses and things resistant to the bleach by using it, and they've evolved around it. And so, but the peroxide works, but it doesn't really work because peroxide is H2O2. You sit peroxide out very long, it loses that reactive oxygen molecule and becomes H2O. So you could never soak your logs in peroxide.
We soak our cakes, but it's like every 4th cake we're changing that. Unless if it's dead, you know, it stops bubbling after maybe the 6th cake. And I've been training people, and they just keep it there because they don't want to waste the peroxide. I'm like, you have to have bubbles in there. This is no good. We're going to get infection if you don't do it.
Don't waste your time.
Right?
You're wasting your time. I'll buy peroxide, I'll buy you. I'd rather buy you than the.
What I was going to ask is if I mix water in a solution of borax, could I also spray the cakes with that and see if it works?
Borax.
Borax,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah. Borate solutions. There's a number of things. There's a number of compounds that contain borax that are made for gardening situations for this, and so that's why I say borates. You know, it's borates, and they're expensive, you know, because they're magical, you know, and people don't understand it's friggin' borax. It's cheap.
Right, and also there's a thing, the UV. I saw this with cannabis because when we clear out our tent and sanitize everything, we use the UV light, which you can't, so, you know, you'll get cancer instantly. You can't even look at it. But there is these little wands that they're selling now, and they use it for cannabis for any little like mites or whatever gets on them. I'm wondering if I got one of them because it seems like you just like kind of go over whatever infection think that would kill the mycelium and the mushrooms and the potency?
I don't know what it is. I would check it out.
Okay.
I would check it out. This is all cutting edge. You just said the major word right there. Someone has developed, and most everything around this mushroom raising and whatnot has been developed in the past like 20 years, and most of it's been developed in the last 5. And it's just mushroom enthusiasts that are backyard mushroom raisers or possibly syllabi raisers that are interested in it and applying a lot of garden technology. A lot of people, the cannabis raisers that are raising it in their second bedroom, whatever, those people have developed a lot of technology, and it's the radical rebel people that seem to be developing a lot of interesting growing technology and discovering an interesting growing facts. I have 3 degrees in agriculture. It's not just hippies. And I was telling her the fun part of our festival is the thing that I enjoy the most, that why I'm friggin' there, is watching some old PhD, retired PhD, with his beard that worked at Michigan State with mushrooms, walk along with some 18-year-old hippie that's barefooted, that's all microdosing, and both of them are just got these looks on their faces. Yeah. And of course, because we're in Ravine Gardens, we just have tons of different kinds of mushrooms, and they be all, and also too, we have a bunch of specimens in our grow area, and so they go over there, oh, no, and they're over there, no, these spores, these spores. And we have a microscope there, so if you want to get going, you can get, because that's the only way you can actually identify a mushroom is by spore print or by spores. And so you need to know what spores look like. We're teaching people. We got to have a microscope.
I blow my nose and it's purple.
And so, but the whole thing is that the peroxide would evaporate. So in the logs, and we have a lot of shiitake raisers around here because we have the best growing area in the world. He was talking about Fushan, China. They get 3 crops of shiitakes. We get 5. We have a tropical growing area here in the summer. We have a temperate growing area similar to Moscow in the winter. So we have 2 distinctly different growing areas in our area. So outside and naturally, we're in a tent. We can have 2 distinctly different types of mushroom growing systems, a tropical and almost Canadian, yeah.
Simple question, I haven't tried shiitakes yet, but online they say fresh logs, is that?
Cut within 3 weeks.
Okay.
And what it is your cambium layer there, they go up and down the cambium layer in between the xylem and the phloem layer, and after about 3 weeks it separates. So they can't, go up and down the log. And so, and so that's what I'll call spawn run, because they run up, down, and of course it's DC electricity. It goes at the speed of lightning. And so if you interfere with it very much, your lightning stops. It's like fast. It's not going to, happen. So, you just have that period there where your cambium and phloem are together. And look at the logs. If they're separated there, they're not going to work. But if they're still together, sometimes we'll cut them, cover them up with a wet blanket and throw a tarp over them, and because we're going to have a workshop coming up and we, want to be all together and stuff. So, you can preserve them a little bit, but you're looking for that xylem and phloem layer, but it's around 3 weeks. If they're in the sun, you're looking at just a few days. So, like that.
Do you have another handout? I didn't.
Oh, yeah. And so, okay. Oh, you want one? Okay. But like I was saying, back to the logs and the black mold. And the black mold is just everybody's best freaking friend that when they start raising logs. And but on here, I think I give the solution is we found this. So see where everybody screws up and gets all this, and then they come back to the festival and tell us what they did. And so around here, this is Gainesville. We got a bunch of weird people, a bunch of weird hippie people that will try anything. So, so it's a good area for this. And then we have a bunch of crazy. We live out in Interlochen and have a bunch of crazy country people back there that came here with the alligators, and and so they're not assimilated much to. They think Gainesville's a big old city, and so they try anything. And so somebody's come up with this, and this is what works, is a half a cap full of bleach for every 3 gallons of water. And you soak your shiitake logs sometimes, or you water them to keep them from drying out in this cambium phloem separation. And so when you soak them, if you'll put this half a cap full of bleach for every 3 gallons of water in them, it seems to, and then sometimes we spray them off afterwards, that, it seems to work for getting rid of it if it's not too terrible bad. And but this seems to be associated too with our live oak trees. If you put your shiitakes or any of your mushrooms around live oaks, it seems to encourage this black mold. If you put them around pine trees, it doesn't seem like they get the black mold as bad. If you build your own cover for them, then, you know, they don't get the rainwater, but you don't get the black mold as bad. So it's just all a compromise, like I said. And then, of course, the 3 major mushroom diseases we encounter are color-coded, just like government forms. And so the green mold, everybody knows what green mold is. Green mold is what gets on bread. You've seen green mold. There's 3 basic types of green mold that are just common green molds. And one is penicillin, one is trichoderma, and I didn't put the other one on here because it's not as common. I'm stuck with common. I stick with basic here. But if you've ever seen bread mold or penicillin or this trichoderma, it like starts out sometimes white and turns green. A lot of times it grows in circular colonies. They're really rapid growth. It turns forest to olive green. It can turn yellow and green, yellowish. Y'all seen it all on bread. Everybody's had some moldy bread, I bet you. And but you can see the rings around the colony, and the rings are where it starts and where it's growing to. And there's a white rim on the edge of the growth, and it grows on the. Green mold is it's growing on the carbohydrates in the matrix. It's not growing on the mold. It's not a mold parasite like lobster mushrooms growing another mushroom is a mushroom parasite. It's not a mushroom parasite, but like back to good sanitation practices and sterilizing it. If you get green mold on your logs, once again, you can bleach your logs. If you have real small areas, we take like a pick and pick it off and put peroxide on them, pour peroxide on them and let it bubble for a while and then let it bubble some more for a while. You can also, and usually you can just kind of pull it off, and if it's just a little bit of it, if you've got very much contamination, you can use the bleach or use the borax or use the peroxide to spray if you get it. But if you're not, it's nothing you're not going to get that much of on something like oysters, because if you get a little of it, you're going to get a whole lot. You know, so there's not much really curative to it. It's like start over. Green mold's one of your start over. Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, so see right here, that's green mold. I have my little thing. That's green mold right there. This is fuzz over here. We've got several diseases going on there. And so here's another disease right there. But, okay, next slide. Okay, now blotch. Okay, green mold, everybody knows about green mold, and it's, you have a question? Okay, is blotch. And blotch, a lot of, see how it turned yellow? Blotch is a fungus, and it turns yellow. And it starts as discoloration and turns to golden. It turns into a depression. Maybe in the grocery store when you go and look for some mushrooms and they look a little bit like they got some spots on them, you can now tell people exactly what it is. They start to smell. They get slimy. They start to smell. I think everybody's had some of those mushrooms. And but the one thing about it is, back to this top of the cap being wet, is over-watering. Avoid keeping the mushroom caps wet. Spraying them too often. Droplets that remain on the surface. I'm sure everybody knows about atomization, that you have little sprayer nozzles and that you buy for different size. The bigger the little droplet that comes out, the further it'll squirt. And the smaller the little droplet, the less far it'll go. But when you have the big droplets and they land on your mushrooms, they're going to sit there. But if you have small in atomization and little stuff, then you're not going to have, and you don't use a whole lot of it, then you're going to have less water droplets directly hitting on your mushroom caps. So more atomization. To do that, a lot of times you can just buy a different sprinkler nozzle if you use that type of watering. And in sprinklers, nozzles, over a period of time, because of the water friction, they start to wear out. they plug up, they get little pits in them or whatever, and so you might want to change your sprinkler nozzles occasionally to maintain them, because they're going to have something in them that maybe a little goo that's going to stop your atomization. But you would like to get the smallest atomization that you can. You don't want to have big droplets, because it does lead to this and to bacterial infections as well. But next slide is mummy. Look at mummy. That's mummy. That's where they just all turn yellow. They start turning yellow, and instead of getting a bunch of blotches on them, they just all turn yellow. And so you have several different varieties of this particularly Pseudomonas that get on the mushrooms. These are the two main varieties, but as you see here, where it says species, that means there's a whole bunch of kinds of species. But the agaricus, this is a big problem in agaricus and tray mushrooms, as well as any other kind of mushrooms. And so I print on the back, because like we went to Target and paid for it and stuff. And so I don't know how much y'all are into mushroom diseases, but dactylium used to be a disease that they've renamed now. They're renaming a lot of the fungus. They're wanting to take the fungi and dump them in a bucket and start out with totally renaming them and reclassifying them, because they've changed so much about classification and learned so much about mushrooms that this one doesn't go there anymore, this one doesn't go there anymore. And so this is one of those. And so they've renamed it, and so it's been renamed Hypomyces. So anyway, most people would still know the old name. And dendroids, of course, means trees. And so this primarily grows on different types of wood matrix, or any type of matrix that has wood in it. But it is that one I showed you before, it had on it. And this is, does anybody know what kind of mushrooms those are?
That looks like hibiscus.
Huh?
Is it philosophy hibiscus?
Silvies.
Silver, yeah.
Those are Silvies. And so, anyway, I got that off the internet. I didn't raise them. But anyway, this is pretty common. This is a very common mushroom disease on wild mushrooms, and wild mushrooms that people are trying to domesticate themselves or raise themselves. We have a lot of people go out in the woods and take them a piece of paper, or take them agar, one of them little agar things, little round things with a little top on it. They go out in the woods and they find the mushroom they want, and they do it over the agar thing, or else they put the mushroom in it or whatever. And don't put the mushroom in it. The mushroom's covered with other fungi. Just put the spores. And also, too, if you're going to do that, you really don't want an open mushroom. You want a mushroom that's still sealed to the veil. There's a little thing around there called a stipe or a veil that's right there where the mushroom's closed. And if it doesn't have a stipe or a veil, people call it a toadstool. But mushroom has a stipe and a veil. And before that, when that pops, yeah, the spores come out, but everything else goes in. So what you want to do is you want to find one in your cluster before it has popped open. So you want to take your little knife, and you want to take your cigarette lighter, and you want to heat your little knife. You want to get all sterile, back to this sterility thing, or contamination. And so you can take it and you can slice that little mushroom open. You can get it a little bit open, and then you can put that on your agar, and then you can seal it back up real fast and take it home.
Well, I know a lot of people will use aluminum foil. They'll cut a big square of aluminum foil, and like you said, they'll try to get a button that just opens and put that on there, and even overnight, and then take it off and fold the aluminum foil up. And it seems like the aluminum does a pretty good job of
It's back to how much money do you want to invest? We know people that have like stacks of the agar things behind their seat in their car in case they have an emergency mushroom moment, and stuff. But now we have aluminum foil in our bag in our bag for the shows, and we have it in the truck, and stuff. But yeah, the aluminum foil works, but make sure you take your cigarette lighter and clean your aluminum foil, because your aluminum foil, by the time you open it up and breathe on it and get it all done, you're going to have so much contamination from slicing your aluminum foil and taking it over here. You're going to get contamination. But that agar is already sealed and sterile, and you can just open that up, get your little stuff, seal it, put it right back closed, real fast, do it real fast. And but like Tom says, some people put the whole mushroom in there, leave it overnight. It's just, a lot of times contamination is a matter of luck and how much the mushrooms love you. you know.
Talking about the spore print?
Yeah,
We
Yeah.
get them on that too.
on
I've seen
aluminum
them.
foil.
He's talking about getting the spores for raising them. You can identify through a spore
And,
print.
most people nowadays that I know get them in distilled water through the mail, you know, but in the spider mites, you know, the kids are all sick and everything, and it's really an individual thing.
It's totally not understood. It's not understood. And the whole thing of this mushroom toxicity, this whole mushroom toxicity thing, and some people breathe in the spores and stuff, that it's starting to get researched in India big time because all these people coming out with black mold, and the black mold is killing as many people now as COVID. If you start, they're saying right now, and and apparently India sounds kind of moldy for all these people to be getting it. And if you live in a place very long, and it seems like around here, this black mold gets on everything pretty fast. There you probably are pretty dry and don't have as much, but you probably have some. You still some. It seems to be a really strong, healthy species, but that's, you just got to figure out some way to love them and live with them. But back to the idea of now, on the bacteria, it seems to be a one-on-one correlation with overwatering, and too much water creates basically two different types of bacterium in them that have a whole lot of subspecies. And so they call wet spot or sour rot is basically, or blotch, and the cure is the same, and we don't really differentiate that much. Gnats and flies, they'll come and nibble on your mushrooms as well, and so if you sell them to the market, nobody wants a nibbled on mushroom. Nobody wants a mushroom that has a little fly come out of it, and things, and so they don't. Some people do. Sometimes what's happened before the market, we've said, proof we're organic, and then people bought it. So, so but, and the thing with the flies and the gnats, and something that I forgot to write in here, is the salt. The salt, you can put it on the mushrooms, but you can also put it next to the mushrooms in a cup. Put a cup of salt next to your mushrooms, and that'll control slugs that want to get in your mushrooms, and gnats and a lot of flies. They just don't like the salt around, and you can put it like in different places. And those people that put up those water bags, to keep the mosquitoes away, that seems to work with the mushrooms. And those water bags work better if you put a little salt in them. Yeah, so salt, sit around.
Quick question, you keep mentioning salt. Is that just regular table salt or
No, sodium chloride.
Epsom salt?
Sodium chloride. Some people have played around with Epsom salts, magnesium sulfate, but nobody's ever come back raving about it. And we have people coming back, calling us up, and they come back to the festival, and they're like, "You wouldn't believe what I did," stuff. So, but with the flies and the gnats, you can use like screens and stuff like that. Put little screens over your logs or over your mushroom bed. And we raise oysters in those blue baby pools, which are easy to put a screen or a tarp over the top of the round pool. Yes?
What were you saying about water bags?
Water bags. Some people take baggies, little Ziploc baggies, they fill them with water, and they staple them up here, and it keeps flies away.
Why is that?
Because
With their eyes.
with their halters. Insects all have two sets of wings, but your dipteras, which are your flies, and they have little wing, but then they have these little knots that are knotted up wings that something happened to them, and they vibrate. And of course, one of those things, nobody in the world knows what fly halters do, but they're the only ones with halters and the only ones confused by the water. And so I think those little vibrating halters, there's something about it with the halters. Now this is just totally pat high, but I think the little halters are having something to do with it. And I think that it changes the water somehow, putting the salt in it in terms of electrical conductivity. And so I think that something about putting a little salt in the water when you put those bags up, I think that messes with their halters and their electrical connectivity to each other. I think they're connected to each other somehow electrically. When you see a bunch of flies around a pile of
They're
poop.
not in direct contact with the water.
No, they're not. But their halters are doing a vibrational frequency, and water is a dampening effect. The salt is, conductive. So I think that, there's something around that. But stapling up those little bags of things, they seem to work. We bought these last year at, I think it was a grocery store, or maybe at Dollar General store. We bought these little bags for controlling yellow flies, and yellow flies are nasty little flies. They're big flies that bite you around here, and they're itch for a month. They're terrible. But we bought these little bags, and they had a little powder, and you put the powder in this and a little water in it, and hung it up. They smell bad, but you go back and it's full of yellow flies. So who cares if it smells bad, because they're terrible and stuff. And so we wonder about that, about catching them, you know. And so you can use something like that to catch them. But, you know, it's a smell that attracts them. So do you want to attract them as opposed to repel them? And it seems like the little water bags repel them. And so, you know, you can go with if you're going to attract them or not. We thought about the attracting, and then we thought, well, yeah, it attracts them, you know. So, you know, just a lot of it's just whatever you think and whatever works for you. Like Tom, it works in one situation, it doesn't work in another. All these people around here that we get raising mushrooms, they go buy Paul Stamets' book or some book about Pennsylvania or Maine about raising mushrooms. None of it works. All of it's completely wrong information for Florida, you know. And, you know, and Paul Stamets in Washington State, Trad Cotter. Our guru is Trad Cotter. Trad Cotter lives in southern South Carolina, and he has mushroommountain.com. And he's gone around to the state parks and taught us about taking the knife, sterilizing the knife, slapping it shut real fast, and then doing it 3 times. That's how he does his spawns, and he has gone around to the national parks and state parks with a permit and gotten all of the spores. It's against the law to take anything out of the park, even one spore. And so, yeah, good. Protect our parks and stuff. And so they're shared. They're for everyone. You can get a permit. Anyone can get a permit. And so we get a permit every year for our festival. Say somebody picks a mushroom, you know, and stuff. And so, but we got that from him, and I don't know, I forgot what I was talking about. But anyway.
Different growing conditions in different places.
Yeah, but that's what's going to happen. So, although I was going to say that the people, they go buy them a bunch of these mushroom books, they come back, it don't work, and then they start doing things, and then after they spend all this money on these books, then they come back and they're like, but we tried this. It wasn't in the book. Everything we tried when we first started raising mushrooms here, everything we tried in the book didn't work. And so,
Even to the cooking, I mean, if you're way up high, the cooking changes the time and all that.
but
Everything to do with it.
But anyway, Trad Cotter has been raising them here a while, and he has really been working with them. And pretty much anything he says is pretty well North Florida oriented. And his spawns work better. He's gotten all these spawns out of the national parks and forests that are southern, you know, he's even gone to North Florida to a couple of state parks where he's gotten spawn. He's from South Florida and had a gardening business, and he discovered his biggest problem was mycelium. And then he just was a happy mushroom eater and decided, why is that a problem? He started raising mushrooms in his closet, getting a bit more and more and more. He had too many, so he started selling them. Started selling more and more. He was raising oysters and all kinds of interesting edible mushrooms in his closet and stuff. And then his wife got pregnant, and he decided, well, I need to build a bigger thing. So he started building a bigger thing, and his wife's parents owned a lot of property in North Carolina, and they were into it. They thought it was cool, and so they deeded him some property, and he built a mushroom facility there. And he does classes, he does tours, you know, and he's a really he has a degree in microbiology, and he's a personable person. You can, you know, talk to him and whatnot. His Olga and Olga's sister now is involved, and the sister writes a lot of articles on mushroom raising, and her mushroom raising articles are some of the best ones I've ever read. And it's many incredible ways, like the oysters, soaking cardboard and water and taking straw and putting it on the cardboard and putting your spawn and then rolling it up and tying it and half burying it and covering it with a tarp. Yeah, it's the best way to raise oysters. And that's oysters. But yeah, you can do it with some of the shiitake spawn. And but her articles, it's not his articles, it's her articles, are really good, and she's just gone off on it and written several on really unusual species like morels and reishi and things that most people are just now being able to raise, and people are trying to go out and get the spawns. We did it, like he was talking about, I said originally, get you an agar thing or a piece of paper, stuff somewhere in between. But what we would do with, what we still do with rishis or something that we want to get out of the woods is go and take a piece of paper and put a piece of paper under some, particularly with your polypores, two kinds of mushrooms that one kind has little gills and one kind has a little sponge underneath. A little sponge has what are called blastocytes because they blast out all at once. And so, and their polypores are what are hard to transport and move, they're really hard to do the polypores. So we put a piece of paper under them right before they're going to bust, and then they explode, and we take the piece of paper, which you can now see is covered with covered with spores. And we take it and we tear the paper up in strips, and we take it and we go find us around here we have something called turkey foot trefoil red oaks. And they're a red oak tree that grows up, and they're not a very strong tree. The top falls out all the time, and the branches fall out all the time. Everybody knows those oak trees that lives around here because they probably almost got hit by one. That they say never camp under one, and stuff. But the top falls out and whatnot. Or just find it, and they get water sprouts before that happens. And a water sprout is when the top of a tree starts to die, it starts getting these little sprouts down at the lower portions that are just trying to keep the tree alive, but the tree is dying. Or you see a tree, one of these live oak trees with some disease in it, a big branch fell off, and now it's all rotted and it's all like got that red stuff on it. We call it fire fungus. It got a bunch of that red stuff on it, killing it, whatever. Find you a diseased tree, find you a dying tree, and take those pieces of paper and pull back the leaves and put the little pieces of paper down and put you some leaves on top and go home and come back in a year.
1 year?
Come back in a year, yeah, come back in a year. Because usually when you've collected these spores, is using its blooming time, because they bloom at a certain time. So it'll probably be a year before it blooms again. And so you can come back in 1 year, you might not have any. If you come back in 2 years, you'll probably have some.
That's what I was wondering, because when I birthed, I had like a trash bag full of the grain, and with all the mycelium on it. So I take it up to the mountain by the water, and I put it in the wettest part of the year, and then I put leaves all over it and stuff. And then I've wondered though, since I do that, because I have seen them come up in my garden around my yard where I do that too. I was wondering if that will be like an every year thing, like do the spores die like after 6 months, or just have one round of it, or does that like go very, because it's very cold?
Spores don't die.
So they never die, so that could be a patch now that I'm creating every year.
You have to keep the environment.
Okay, this is
The spores don't die. They're going to be there. They're going to be there in a million years probably. But the environment, the changeability in the environment. Remember I said that sometimes a mushroom around here will come out once every 5 years?
right.
Because it just was too wet or too dry or too something. Yeah, so you have to create the proper environmental conditions. And that's what we do with this mushroom raising, is we create environmental conditions. And the shiitakes and the oysters and the wine caps, they're very easy to raise. And so, like I said, if you can't take those 3 home and get some mushrooms, you got a problem. You can,
Give up, right?
you can take the oysters or the logs pretty much and throw them as long as you throw them in the corner and not in the sun, they're probably going to work. So, so it's just a matter of how far you want to get into it. And you can, like I said, like Oliver, you can get your bale of hay, throw it in the pond, and stick you some spawn in it, and go back and pick mushrooms. They get lots of mushrooms, but controlling the flies and the gnats and the little bugs, like I said, you can get real small steel wire, or small, not steel screen wire, but that cloth, plastic kind of screen wire comes extremely small. We have something around here called no-see-ums. They're teeny-tiny little bugs. Everybody, They do that about yellow flies too. And but they're little teeny-tiny bugs, and they bite like just terrible bites. And but some people buy no-see-um screen. It costs more, but it's super small, and you really can't see through it very well. But it does keep the no-see-ums out, and so no-see-um screen works. And for them, and if you have a lot of mice and squirrels and critters, you can put chicken wire and take no-see-um screen and put it on chicken wire, because the no-see-um screen is just really clothly flexible, and you can put it onto the chicken wire, and then you can build yourself a little cover and we put little wooden things on the sides that are like treated wood that won't rot, you know, kind of thing, and made a little cover that take 2 people to put it on and 2 people to put it off, but it keeps out the squirrels and stuff. But anyway, those are some of the things that you can do, or you can, of course, invent your own for it. The critters, in terms of our biggest critter problems, are mice, squirrels, and deer. Bambi friggin' loves shiitakes, and once Bambi has one shiitake, Bambi will climb a fence, Bambi will pull your tarps off. Bambi's serious about it, you know. And something that we do for deer hunters is encourage the deer is stumps. We have a program called Plug Your Stump, and if you have a stump in the shade where you just cut down a fresh tree, you can plug it, and it's in the shade next to water or something. You can plug your stump with shiitakes, and it'll come out covered in shiitakes for several years. It'll come out just covered because they eat the roots out. And if you have a stump you want out of the way, you can plug it with oysters, and it'll eat your stump up in like a year or so. And there's some huge live oak tree in like 2 years will be gone if you plug it with oysters. And with shiitakes, it'll be around a few years. But if you do it down next to a creek or somewhere or something, there's no reason that just us, it's not all about the humans. The deer can't have a shiitake log or 2 themselves, that somebody plugged for them down next to the creek, and they can have some, you know. But once they start liking them, they can smell them. Shiitakes smell. When we walk out to our shiitakes, you can smell them, you know, and stuff, all the spores. But the mice get into the logs and into the stands of logs, and if you cover them with chicken wire, the hawks and the owls can't get to them. But if you'll leave off if you encourage the hawks and owls, then the hawks and owls will come, and they'll dig into your logs and get those mice out, which is really kind of cool. We thought that was kind of cool the first time that we saw an owl out digging in our logs. We're like, the owls are eating the shiitakes now, you know. And then it flew off with a mouse, and I ate my words. Yeah. So anyway, but the deer, mice, and squirrel, one of the things that we have is dogs, and our dogs seem to do a really good job, except for the mice. You know, we've had possums come move underneath them, dig holes underneath them, which they came whenever the dogs weren't there, you know, kind of thing. And so, you know, we dug it out and shot it. What can I say? But I was mad. But we're Buddhists. We try to live in peace with everything. But sometimes we just are human about it. But you can buy fruit tree covers that are for fruit trees, and you can cover your logs with those. If you have a lot, those work pretty much. And attracting owls and hawks is good. Like I said, shotguns. Poppy things work too. You can, when it's 4th of July, you can buy these little things to put on doors that when you pull them, they pop. And you can put those around for the deer. And when, you know, like the deer might have a little path. The deer has a path. And so you see a little deer path, and here's the things, and your little strings just this long. Tie a little something on the string. We have to tell people to do that. Like, the string wasn't long enough. Well, tie something to it, silly. And so, but the little poppy things, they work. You put those on the deer path. Deer don't like that path no more. Little poppy things work. And there's also little poppy things that you can step on that go pop. And those things work too. Any kind of little poppy thing works. Something that we did with ours is something called a Martha house. It's a small little teeny frame, a small little light frame that you can buy that has a little cover over it that's green, that has a little string running through the little cover plastic thing, and has a little zipper that goes like this. And the bottom of it comes down, and then it goes out like this, such that you can we put a tarp under it, and then we put carpet around the outside edges, you know, like that. And, you know, and then we put a tarp over the top of it that extends out over the door, and we change our shoes and put on a mask when we go inside, and generally take our shirt off, you know. When we go in and stuff, we feel like our skin's probably better than our shirt and stuff. But, and we try to go in as little as possible, you know, kind of thing. We don't unzip it very often. And the whole thing is we think stuff's coming through the zipper, but it has 2 little windows. And, you know, the mushrooms are just like us. They breathe oxygen and give off carbon dioxide. So I bought these 2 HEPA filter things off the internet, and duct tape them into the little windows, you know. And I think the little house was like $100. The 2 HEPA filters were like $35. But I feel like that, and it's like maybe, it's not that tall. It's maybe about like that tall and maybe about this wide and maybe about that long. But it's a nice little structure for $100, you know. And so we sort of push that at the festival. We're trying to get somebody that sells them to come there, because that's, we call it our little mushroom house. Officially on the, like I said, on the internet, it's called a Martha house. But comes with little shelves, little metal shelves and things. And we figured when it came out of the box, it was probably pretty sterile. Whenever we redo a mushroom crop, we spray it out, you know, and just spray it out. We don't get obsessive. We don't have no ultraviolet light, you know, anything that fancy. But we like spray it out and try to do as cheaply as we can maintain a small level of separation. Yeah.
So everything you've mentioned has been sort of outdoors.
Mhm.
When it comes to indoors and outdoors, and you know, this lady here mentioning breathing of spores, do you have any words of wisdom on, you know, growing mushrooms in your house indoors? Because I know a lot of them need a certain temperature range.
Mhm.
You know, humidity you can control, but what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, all of these diseases and whatnot are all just as subject to outdoors, indoor. They really are. The black mold just seems to like the logs, you know, but it'll get on anything, you know. And like I said, it's the house
Is there
mold.
any reason why you shouldn't do indoors in a living space versus?
Because of the fact of the mushroom toxicity from the spores. That's when I said that we recommend sealing up a spare bathroom. You could seal up a spare bedroom, but the bathroom is really handy because you have the running water, you have the bathtub, and you don't have to, when you go in there and close the door, you don't have to do anything to have running water, you know. And then you have this bathtub and this toilet that you don't have to remove anything. You know, you can, you know, there's not much of mushroom raising, you can't flush down the toilet, okay, you know, and stuff. And so you don't have to open and close your door. Opening and closing that door is something really bad. And if you want to put a tarp over the door, if you want to build an extension on the door and build an extra little just spot just big enough to change clothes, and if you want alcohol off your body, you know, put a bottle, get all naked and take a bottle of alcohol and just squirt yourself off, put on some clothes that have been bleached and put in the dryer, you know, kind of thing. And, you know, it's just as much as you want to get, you know, and most people end up in their garage or building another little room. Like I was talking about the refrigerator, that we have a number of people that raise shiitakes and oysters in old refrigerators, in old freezers. The ones like this, they take out, they sterilize them out, then they spray paint the little shelves, you know, in the refrigerator, but they can close it up, it's sterile, they can control the temperature, they can control the humidity, it's a grow chamber. You know, we've been trying to get someone to make a grow chamber. And something else that people use that are dishwashers, because they got the shelves, and you can sterilize them. All you can do is turn it on, spray it down. They spray it down with alcohol, turn it on, run it for a cycle, and then like turn it off. And then they'll, you know, use the shelves to grow mushrooms, and they won't use it. They'd rather grow mushrooms in it than freaking wash dishes, you know. And then another person replaced theirs. The first person replaced theirs and was raising them out in the backyard and using the water hose hooked to it because something about it wasn't working, about the swish or something, but water would go through it. And so they were using it, and then somebody else started using the one in their house, and they'd rather just raise mushrooms in it. And, you know, I mean, people just do everything. And then another person that had a big one of those open-up freezers like that, they put their logs in there. And their shiitakes, they were supposed to be this big, you know, they were that big, you know. So the more you encourage them, they're like honey. I tell people to think of a stack of shiitake logs or a pool. We raise oysters in baby pools, or a pool as a honeybee hive. Don't think of it as a plant. Think of it as a honeybee hive, because it's going to need oxygen. It's going to need specific growing conditions around temperature and water. And that if you want to relate to people, and the University of Florida here wants to promote their plants. They're not. Their extension agents want to like promote their plants and talk about botany. That has nothing to do with it. You're wrong page, baby. They breathe oxygen, just like you and me, and give off carbon dioxide. Plants build carbon chains. Animals build nitrogen chains. They build nitrogen chains. You know, they create amino acids. Plants don't do that except in their oils and seeds. And so, I just don't know. I just think the whole thing is that we were turned off to them by the Christians for so long, and now trying to reawaken all of this, that we're going to make some mistakes, and people that raise them inside their house, they're, learning a lot of stuff. But most of the people that we know, and we encourage, because of the mushroom toxicity thing, build in another little area. You can put up one of these little Martha houses or buy a big Martha house. And one woman built a big greenhouse to raise them because she lost a lot of room. She works at Home Depot and gets all this shit free. If it's broken, she brings it home. And it's a broken 2x4s, everything. But she's got her a big old greenhouse and got like this little section, this little section for this time, and stuff. And got her a broken HEPA filter that she fixed and stuff. And so, but we suggest the secondary room there around humidity, sterility. You're not going to really be able to make your living conditions and theirs the same. What we tell people is about shiitakes is when you go to sit down or lay down, you're going to look for a place with like good airflow, good light. All the things that you're going to look for in a spot is exactly what the mushrooms don't look for. They look for the spot on the bathtub that glows green stuff, the spot on the back of your house that grows green stuff. There's your habitats right there. And if you have a nice spot in your yard that grows green stuff, or a nice spot on your house that grows green stuff, you have an excellent place to put your logs. People are like, where to put our logs? Well, that's where you put them. That's your spot right there, because it has, and people are like, I'm going to grow them in my lanai on my, these people from Miami, they all want to buy a log and put it in their lanai when everyone can see it, and it'll be there, and the sun will hit it there, and stuff. No, kind of thing. And, and so what you're looking for is not your conditions, but its conditions. And when you realize the conditions in your home are not suitable mushroom raising conditions, you really want to make a separate room or a separate space, but a guest bedroom would be fine. But once you start dealing with a house that's been lived in for a while, you're going to have so much, what it says here about the LaFrance disease, so many residual things that are there for years and years, a bunch of old dead skin in the corner, a flea that pooped in the corner, last year, that you don't even have a dog, but you brought home a flea in your sock, kind of thing. And so the house thing, you want a little bit higher humidity too with all of the mushrooms than you're going to like. It's going to make stuff in your house mold, it's a much more humidity than you're going to like. So, you can build a simple little block structure that's easy to sterilize, or like I said, a little Martha house thing that it's easy. And the one thing about the Martha house is about 3 years, the thing's going to start crapping out, and you're going to start getting contamination. So about the time it craps out and gets contamination is about the time you can start raising your flowers in it and get another one, and it's like $100, as opposed to a bunch of block or a bunch of crazy stuff.